Well, hello again. It's July 4th, Independence Day, Saturday, 2020. And I have the privilege of leading you on this course, discovering the secret of our shadow and Debbie Ford's brilliance as I read you chapter 4, Why You Hold On to Your Story. Why do you hold on to your story? This is what Debbie has to say. Our fear of change, our fear of stepping into new realities is so deep that we desperately cling to the world we know. We often mistake familiarity for safety. The perceived comfort we derive from what is familiar keeps us living in the illusion of our stories. But the question we should ponder is, are we really safe inside our stories? Instead of risking change, we hold on for dear life and resist the uncertainty of the unknown. Debbie once read a story about a woman swimming across a lake with a rock in her hand. As this woman neared the center of the lake, she started to sink from the weight of the stone. "Drop the rock!" shouted some people who were watching from the shore. But the woman kept swimming, now disappearing for moments at a time under the water. "Drop the rock!" the onlookers hollered louder. The woman had reached the middle of the lake and was now sinking as much as she was swimming. Once more, the people urged, "Drop the rock!" And as the woman disappeared from sight for the last time, they heard her say, "I can't. It's mine." Most of us have spent too much time resisting our dramas rather than looking for the wisdom in each of our unwanted aspects, beliefs, and circumstances. Resistance locks us inside the emotional pain of a situation. It traps us in the reality that we most want to change. Resistance comes from wishing or wanting our present circumstances to be different. Even the slightest desire for things to change can create massive amounts of internal resistance. Whether we are resisting our entire story or just a small piece of it, resistance causes us internal imbalance. It acts like glue, attaching us to the very feelings and beliefs we most want to shake free from. Even though it might seem backward, the first thing we need to do in order to heal is to accept all that we have been resisting. For the last 7 years, in over 50 different cities, Debbie had repeated these words: "What you resist persists. What you resist persists." If you take the meaning of this phrase to heart, you will have the power to make permanent, healthy changes in all areas of your life. Even though she had continually taught people to embrace all that they are, most people insist on hating or disliking some aspect of their lives. It doesn't matter which part of their lives it shows up in: their bodies, their relationships, their parents, or their finances. Resistance and healing do not go together. So if you choose to resist anything in your life, if you hate it, if you judge it, if you dislike it, you have guaranteed that that issue will persist. Resistance denies us inner tranquility and the happy ending we so desire. It is the reason we stay the same. Resistance to going beyond and moving through our issues is the cause of our repetitious behaviors. Resistance to what is sucks our vital energy and blocks the natural flow of our evolution. The cost of resistance. Our resistance is triggered whenever we make ourselves, others, or the world wrong. The internal belief that sets up our resistance says, "It shouldn't be like this." When we then spend all our energy trying to change the reality of our circumstances. When Debbie lectured, she would love asking people, "How many of you have spent more than 1,000 hours of your life trying to change the people around you, the events of your past, or some quality about yourself that you don't like?" Whether it's your fear, your selfishness, your fat, or your bank account. Everyone, and I mean everyone, raises their hands. Most of us believe that if we resist the unwanted conditions of our lives long enough or hard enough, they will go away. One thing I can promise you with absolute certainty is that resisting what is will never make it go away. It might drive you deeper into denial and deeper into your story, but it won't change what happened to you when you were 3. It won't help you lose 20 pounds, and it won't make you like your ex-husband. In Debbie's study of karate, her teacher taught her that sometimes the best way out of a compromising situation is to let go. For example, if an attacker grabs your arm, instead of tightening up and pulling away, you need to step toward your opponent and relax your arm completely. Pulling away from the attacker triggers a natural response in him to hold on tighter. So in order to get away from the attacker, you must first surrender your grip. Then you let go and relax, and your opponent's grip will naturally loosen, giving you the opportunity to break free from their hold. See, our initial response is always to resist any perceived threat, yet it's only when we breathe deep, relax, and lean into the experience that we stand strong and gain access to all our power and strength. In order to transcend our suffering, we must go against our instinct to hold on and instead surrender to the path of letting go. Anything we want to change, anything we're afraid of, anything that we are angry about or refuse to accept will keep us glued to the past and attached to our stories and the shadow beliefs that drive them. Surrendering to what is requires us to soften our hearts, let go of the expectations that come out of our stories, and accept whatever life presents us. Surrendering to all the ingredients that have made up our lives invites us to listen with innocent ears to the deeper message of our pain rather than being stopped by the familiar conclusions voiced by our shadow boxes. Only when we admit that we are clinging to the comfort of our stories will we be able to soften our resistance and gain the wisdom of our life's experiences. Only by making a new decision to use our stories, to love ourselves, rather than to beat ourselves up, will we ever be free to use them in the way they were designed to be used. I promise you, and Debbie promises you, that if you let go, if you resign as general manager of the universe and as the star of your drama, your life will get easier and you will be able to hear the deeper calling of your soul. So here's the next part of why you hold on to your story and what you need to know. Nobody's coming. There is no better time to begin the process of seeing your story for what it is, with all its limitations and its promises, than right now. There is no one who can do this for you. Nobody is coming to save you. For Debbie, the tides changed when she came to this unsettling realization. For years, she kept trying to make her life better. She worked hard to change the circumstances of her life, but she always seemed to fall short of her desired results. Then one day, sitting on the bathroom floor of her apartment and feeling sorry for herself, a light went on, and she had a profound and life-changing realization. No one is coming. She could continue to suffer, to work hard and try to make her story nice and fun-filled and easy like she dreamed of, or she'd get off the floor, grow up, and face the fact that no one was coming to save her. In a moment of grace, she realized that she had waited her entire life for her mother, her father, the man of her dreams, someone to come and pick her up and tell her she was perfect, that her life was perfect, that she got everything or anything she wanted, and to promise her that from now on she would have a fairy tale existence. Unknowingly, most of us are waiting for someone or something to rescue us. But Debbie is here to tell you that no one is coming. Not your mother, not your father, not a prince on a white horse. Though most of us think that if we wait long enough, someone will step in and save us. The very sad truth is that nobody can travel our path for us. If we are brave enough to give up the hope that anyone is coming to save us, we will take an important step toward taking responsibility for our lives and our happiness. Stepping into hopelessness. Most of us spend a lot of time fooling ourselves into believing the good old one day, soon, I will catch up with my dreams. that story and enrolling ourselves into that story in the hope that our lives will get better. Even though we need hope in times of great distress, it is important that we distinguish between authentic hope and wishful thinking. Often we trick ourselves into believing we are getting somewhere when really we are getting nowhere. Hope, positive thinking, and pleasant fantasies can easily turn into denial. Several years ago, Debbie was involved in a very stressful relationship with a boyfriend. She had spent years hoping it would get better. Her hope prevented her from taking responsibility for her own feelings and dealing with the problems at hand. Instead of spending her time looking at her options and learning the lessons that were being presented to her, she spent hours upon hours daydreaming, wishing, and hoping that one day, miraculously, everything would be okay. Instead of dealing with reality and going into the pain of recognizing that she'd had yet another failed relationship, she sank into denial. Or if you prefer acronyms, denial. Don't even notice I am lying. Her perceived hope had put blinders on her eyes and plugs in her ears, which served only to delay the inevitable. Reality is often painful. The great paradox and irony of it all is that if we are willing to give up the hope that we can change, fix, or transform our stories, if we are willing to let go and feel the hopelessness of no longer knowing who we will find hope again. So, she had found so often in her coaching practice that people would rather hold on to a grain of hope than deal with reality. See, our fear of dealing with loss or pain keeps us tied to our stories and keeps us repeating the same old, same old. Some people get their fix of hope from books, tapes, and lectures. While this type of inspiration can at times be useful, if we use it to justify our current circumstances, it will become no more than just another page in our stories. Several years ago, Debbie had worked with Margaret, a wealthy woman who at first glance appeared to have it all. Margaret traveled all over the world visiting spas and retreat centers and had the means to afford the best advice money could buy. A self-proclaimed self-help junkie, Margaret went from workshop to workshop hoping that spending time with people she considered to be important would give her the recognition she craved. But inside, plagued by insecurity, she felt unseen and unimportant, a seemingly insignificant incident like someone not returning her call would cause her to obsess for days. Margaret spent most of her energies searching for something that would make her feel like she belonged. During their third session, she noticed that Margaret seemed to be getting weaker. Her body was breaking down and she appeared more frantic and fearful. Debbie suggested that she detach herself from all the groups and individuals she had been clinging to in the hope that she would one day belong. Knowing that what she sought could be found only inside herself, Debbie gave her the assignment to withdraw from her self-help addiction and turn her attention inward. But Margaret couldn't do it. She was too terrified of being alone, of being without all the distractions that held the promise of recognition and belonging. She continued in her familiar pattern of behavior, clinging to the hope that one day it would pay off. Margaret read book after book, searching for a philosophy that would justify her actions, all the while gathering evidence that supported her in staying the same. Whenever Debbie spoke to her about the self-destructive patterns she was displaying, she would quote a line from the latest book she was reading. Debbie, I just read a book that says we are all doing the best we can. I'm doing the best I can too. Margaret was very creative at coming up with ways to justify her behavior. One week she came in and told Debbie she had been mistreated and verbally abused by her family. When Debbie asked her what she wanted to do about it, she replied, "Everything's perfect exactly the way that it is." And Debbie watched as Margaret continued on her painful quest, all the while gasping at the affirmations that held the promise of hope. She was more committed to the path of justification than to exploring the underlying issues that were haunting her. Debbie asked Margaret to make a list of all the expressions and inspirational messages she used in order to avoid dealing with reality. This was a person who had read every self-help book that hit the bestseller list and attended every seminar that offered any promise of happiness. In her search, she had gathered quite a collection of aphorisms that kept her from feeling the desperation of her situation. Here are some of the pearls of wisdom she used to feed her self-hope. It's always darkest just before the dawn. No, what doesn't kill me makes me stronger. No pain, no gain. There's a reason for everything. God doesn't give me anything I can't handle. It's a process. Miracles can happen. The universe is working through me. Let go and let God. It's all an illusion. This too shall pass. There's always someone worse off than me. Maintain an attitude of gratitude. Do what you love and the money will follow. Things always work out for the best. What is, and what's not, is not. Every cloud has a silver lining. The joy is in the journey. There's gold in the dark. Time heals all wounds. Today is the first day of the rest of your life. All this wisdom, which Margaret had spent years of her life collecting, had now become just another part of her story, just another attempt that didn't work. Even though it's been 3 years since they worked together, when Debbie ran into Margaret in town, she still gave her poetic excuses for why things weren't going her way and why she was stuck. Because she was unwilling to face the underlying problems that kept her addicted to certain people and organizations, Margaret remained stuck in the same repetitive patterns she knew so well. She had convinced herself that this is the way God wanted her life to be, and that if the universe wanted more for her, somehow the doors would magically fly open. Instead of going inside herself and asking, is there something in me that is causing the same thing to show up over and over again? Margaret continued to cling desperately to hope, leaving everyone around her with the hopelessness of her life. So Debbie tells you Margaret's story as a word of caution. If you've been stuck in a bad situation or a disempowering relationship for more than a year, do not allow your story to seduce you into thinking it will all work out for the best, because that is, after all, just another story. The great attempt. Many of us have fallen into the never-ending trap of trying to fix our stories. Some of us have spent years of our lives and too much of our energy rewriting the plot of recasting the characters of our personal dramas, hoping to transform our lives and put our shadow boxes to rest. But no matter how hard we try to fix our stories, we continually wind up flattened by the limitations that our personal dramas hold in place. Although making some minor improvements will help us look and feel better, those moments of joy are short-lived unless we make the conscious decision to step outside the limitations of our stories. The temporary sense of freedom we feel after reading an inspirational book or listening to a motivational tape will be replaced by hopelessness and despair until we understand that the root of our problem is the mistaken belief that we are our stories. Even the best Band-Aid is bound to fail. Recently, having met a beautiful young woman at one of the courses, Debbie immediately noticed Caroline's bouncy walk and cheerful personality. On all the breaks, she would walk up to her, waiting to get her attention, and flash Debbie a big, beautiful smile. But by the second day of the process, Caroline's smile slowly began to fade and was replaced by a look of sadness, fear, and despair. Finally, she approached Debbie, asking if she could have a few minutes of her time, and began sobbing as she told her how many approaches she had tried in an effort to find lasting peace. She had tried to keep a positive attitude, and when that failed, she had gone into therapy. She had been to many personal growth seminars, read hundreds of self-help books, and listened to countless hours of motivational audio tapes. Audio tapes. That's a time marker. She now found herself devastated because after all those years of trying to fix herself, she still felt a huge sadness just beneath the surface of her consciousness. Debbie asked Caroline, close your eyes and describe to me your life's most painful incident. She told her that when she was 5 years old, her father had come home, picked up her older brother, and then left. Caroline didn't see either of them again for 10 years. Debbie asked her how she had dealt with the pain of that trauma, and she said her mother had told her that she had to think positive and keep a smile on her face. By the time Caroline was 15, she was in so much pain that she began exploring every approach from physical exercise to spiritual practices that might offer some relief. She kept looking for a quick fix, some bit of motivation or inspiration that she could hold on to for a day or a week, but the relief never lasted long. Eventually, she would slip back into the hopelessness of her story. Debbie gently suggested that Caroline use the weekend to grieve the loss of her brother and her father. She stared at her blankly. You mean go into the pain, she said. Debbie drove home that night thinking about all the years each of us spends trying to change our story, trying to pretend that our traumas or our humiliations never happened, and trying to conceal the pain of our past. Debbie reflected on the massive amount of energy we each expend trying to change the way we feel, the way we think, and the way we behave, all in the hope that one day, with enough work, our lives will transform and we will finally be happy. Every time Debbie led a seminar, she had the privilege of sitting in front of a group of some of the most extraordinary people on the planet. These are the people who have worked hard at their lives. Some have studied with the greatest spiritual masters of our times. Others have worked with therapists, otherwise teachers, to heal their pasts and make a contribution to the world. Yet still they are left with the feeling that there is more for them to know, more wisdom to be attained before they will be whole. Their lives are driven by an internal struggle that continually keeps them searching for a better, ultimately more meaningful life. For years, Debbie questioned why none of us can seem to find whatever it is we are looking for. Why, with all this knowledge, with all this wisdom, are we still on the hunt for something more? Why do bad things happen to good people? Why is continuous joy so unattainable? Why do our dreams always seem to be one step ahead of us? Some of us have even driven ourselves deeply into debt, looking for the answers to why our lives are the way they are. In one of Debbie's trainings, she listed all the methods, techniques, and approaches we have used to try to fix ourselves and our stories. The list was huge. We had visited acupuncturists, past life regressionists, and for most of us, more than our fair share of therapists. We had worked on our anger, our inner child, our inner critic, and when that failed, we had tried ecstatic dance. We had tried visualizing, affirming, chanting, and meditating our way out of our pain. We had sought the advice of nutritionists, trainers, life coaches, yoga teachers, and gurus. And when those didn't work, we had sought out our internist for a prescription of Prozac. We had cleansed our chakras, sniffed essential oils, lit scented candles to calm our minds. Some of us had soaked in energetically balanced baths while listening to harmonically soothing music. We had burned incense, specially imported from India, put magnets under our pillows, worn amulets around our necks, and mood rings on our fingers. We had picked angel cards and had our tarot cards read. We had tried volunteering our time, doing service to help people who seemed worse off than we were. Some of us had tried a rich husband or a young, pretty wife. Our list went on. And even though we had a tremendous laugh over it, most of us were left in the presence and pain of the story that couldn't be fixed. And the question that arose was simple. Is there any hope? Going beyond the known. A deep longing drives us to fix our stories. We long to return to our natural state of wholeness, to the place where we know we are the vastness of the universe rather than the smallness of our personal dramas. In our effort to find utopia, the land of peace and fulfillment, we form relationships, build businesses, and attend retreats. We spend hundreds of hours reading, studying, and accumulating knowledge that we hope will return us to our natural state of grace. But even when our knowledge fails us, we continue our search. Deep inside, we know that a return to wholeness is possible. After all, if we truly believe it was unattainable, we wouldn't spend so much of our lives chasing it. We would settle instead for the repetitive drama we all know so well. But most of us don't settle. That deep longing drives us to find our way home. It drives us to search until we wake up to the vastness of our eternal selves, the self that is beyond our story, our eternal self. When we are ready to remain conscious inside our stories, we must confront our deepest truth. Our minds can't take us where our hearts long to go. Our minds drive us to find answers, but the answers we find are often what prevent us from finding our deeper truth. For example, our society knows more about dieting and health than ever before. Yet our population continues to suffer from health and weight problems. Knowing what to eat and knowing how much exercise we need will not give us the motivation to eat well and exercise. However, if we get in touch with the sacredness and the wholeness of our inner beings and feel what it is like to be healthy and strong, we will naturally desire to feed ourselves and take care of ourselves in the best way possible. Debbie's friend Patrick said, knowing the way is not going the way. Knowing the way is not going the way. Knowing is the booby prize. That's a transformational truth from Landmark. Knowing is the booby prize. Werner Erhard defined that transformational truth. Knowing lives in our minds. Being lives in our hearts. In order to be the you that you long to be, you must give up the you that you know. In fact, you must give up all that you know. Debbie was constantly amazed at all the men and women who walk into her seminars who can literally recite the texts of some of the greatest spiritual books of our times. Yet, they are keenly aware that even with all this knowledge, with all this wisdom, there is still something missing. The fear of letting go. This is why you hold on to your story. Holding on to what we know is the biggest reason we remain stuck in our stories. As humans, we desperately want to believe we know who we are, but thinking that we know who we are and what we're made of is actually what seals us inside our stories. Our thoughts are limited. They live inside the identity that we believe ourselves to be. Each of us has an ego that desperately wants to know. The ego doesn't want to know just for the sake of knowing. It wants to know so that it can feel superior to the next person. This is the way of all human beings. It's not bad. It's not wrong. It's just what is. Don't spend your time trying to get rid of your ego. You can't. Just like you can't get rid of your story. They are essential aspects of your divine recipe, which we will explore later on. But for now, you must admit who is running the show and what motives are operating at all times in your life. Our need to control, our need to know, our need to control, our need to be right, and our need to be somebody are what keep us trapped inside our stories. It's a natural response to try to fix something that doesn't work, and if we can't fix it, our next impulse is to try to get rid of it. But no matter what we do, we cannot fix or get rid of our stories. If we did succeed in getting rid of our stories, we would never find out who we are at the deepest level. If we win the game of fixing our stories, we lose the bigger game of knowing ourselves because we might choose to stay in our stories, convincing ourselves that ours is not really a story, but rather who we are. If we do this, we will miss our opportunity to contribute our unique piece to the grand puzzle of life. It's like winning a fight but losing the war. What we think we will receive by fixing our stories pales in comparison to what we will win when we step outside our stories into the fullness of who we truly are. Many of us are afraid to let go of our stories even when they no longer serve us, for fear that we won't know ourselves without them. Who would I be without my story, we asked. I'm scared. I won't know myself. I say hooray that you won't know yourself. It is so exciting not to know yourself. The self you know is a limited part, a tiny speck of who you really are. It's like a single pane in a huge kaleidoscope filled with thousands of colors. You have been committed to thinking of yourself as one pane of crystal red glass, when in actuality you are 1,000 jubilant colors, all intertwined and dancing together to create magical images. Every time you turn the kaleidoscope in a different way, a whole new world opens up to you. By shifting your focus, suddenly you can see things you never saw before. The perspective you hold about yourself is nothing more than a limited view of your true nature. I look forward to going into why you hold on to your story with you in our 6th session of our SOS workshop, where we get to save our souls and save our ship and discover the secret of our recipe in our shadow story.